Abu Ali Al-Hussein ibn Abdullah ibn Al-Hasan ibn Ali ibn Sino, the great scientist and encyclopedist of Central Asia, was born in 980 in the small village of Afshana, in the modern Bokhara region, near Bokhara. The last part of his name, Ibn Sina, was distorted in Europe into Aven Sino and became Avicenna. Sino in Dari means pearl driller. Ibn Sino's father, Abdullah ibn Hasan, was a man cultured and wealthy. He served as a tax collector in Bokhara. By the way, he was in the village of Afshana, built himself a house, and got married. The village of Afshan during the time of Ibn Sina was described by his contemporary, a 10th century historian, Muhammad Narshahi. Afshana consists of a large city and a strong fortress. Several villages face the city. There is a market there on a certain day. People consider this place sacred. My father, writes Ibn Sina in his autobiography, was born in Balkh *****. During the reign of ibn Mansur, R.A. He came from there to Bokhara and served in the Diwan of the chancellery there. He was given the administration of Harmasan, the center of a rural district near Bokhara. He married my mother from one of the nearest villages, Afshana, whose name was Sitara, a star. First I was born there, then my brother, judging by the name and surname of his mother. Notes. N. Zavodovsky, Ibn Sina belonged to the autochthonous people of Central Asia, speaking the Persian Dari language. In this language he wrote quatrains for the peace of the soul. When little Hussein was 5 years old, the family moved to Bokhara. When I was 10 years old, we moved to Bokhara, where I was taken to a teacher of the Quran and a teacher of literature. At the age of 10, I learned the Quran and literature. Science and such achievements were so great that everyone was amazed. The boy's extraordinary abilities were noticed early. After 10 years, his father took him out of school, and Hussein received additional education from home tutors. He intensively studied mathematics, physics, law, logic, astronomy, philosophy, geography, and many other subjects. The family environment contributed to the development of the young man. Ibn Sina's youth was spent in Bokhara, a major cultural center of the East, which competed with Baghdad, the capital of the Caliphate. Bokhara, the capital of the Samanid state, was one of the richest feudal cities in the East in the 10th to 11th centuries. Numerous craftsmen, potters, weavers, builders, jewelers, made Bokhara a major center of trade and crafts. The Samanid state, 819 to 999, was a feudal state in its heyday in the first half of the 10th century. It included Mawarnir, Khorasan, northern and eastern Iran. It had vassals from Khwarezm, Sistan, Gorgan, Jurdzan, Rasht, Ghazni, and Tabriz, Mazandran. It occupied one of the first places in the East economically. Artificial irrigation was widely used in agriculture. Wheat, rice, cotton, alfalfa, flax, and hemp were grown. Large areas were occupied by orchards and vineyards. Mining was developed. Iron, copper, and cast iron were mined. Caravan trade connected Bokhara with many countries. The famous Silk Road passed through Bokhara from Baghdad to Beijing. Cotton, silk, carpets, wool, bows, boats, and saddles were exported from Bokhara and Khwarezm. Caravans with 3,000 to 5,000 horses and camels often traveled from Western Asia to Mongolia and China. Another caravan route connected Khwarezm with the Khazar Kingdom and the Urals and the Volga. Finally, another route to the southwest passed through Baghdad. Numerous contacts with many countries: Iran, Iraq, Syria, India, China, Byzantium. Kievan Rus provided a variety of information and created favorable conditions for the exchange of spiritual values. The rise of cultural and economic life in Bokhara, Gurganj, and other cities was also facilitated by the fact that Maovaranir, between the Amu Darya and the Sir Darya, was not subjected to external attacks for a long time, for a whole century. Only when we consider the work and views of Ibn Sina in close connection with the culture of the peoples of the East can we correctly understand and appreciate his creative achievements. The rich and unique culture of the peoples of the East existed before these peoples fell under the control of the Arabs. For example, we can recall the excavations of the village Tolstoy in Khwarezm, which existed there before our era, was created by the peoples of Central Asia, Bactria, Khwarezm, Sogdian, Sak, etc. Bokhara was an important cultural center. It had schools, libraries, hospitals, many magnificent buildings. One of them, the Mausoleum of Ibn Sina, built in the shape of a cube, with beautiful geometric patterns on its walls, has survived to this day and amazes with its architectural and decorative expressiveness. Many educated people lived in the city: lawyers, scientists, philosophers, architects, doctors. Cultural life in Bokhara reached its peak in the 10th to 19th centuries. Poets and scientists whose names are known far beyond the borders of their native land lived here. Farabi, Radaki, Dakiki, Ferdowsi, the creator of the Shahnameh. This is no coincidence. The high flowering of culture should explain the emergence of another star of the first magnitude at this time, Abu Ali Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina's father was close to the Ismailis. In his service as a tax collector, he dealt with money changers and moneylenders of Bokhara, all of whom came from Egypt. One of the biographies of Ibn Sina, written by Nikolai Massa and included in many editions of the Canon, says his father loved to listen to the singing of Memphis singers and conversations with scholars and gathered them for these conversations. The customs and events of Memphis in the presence of his sons brought great joy to Avicenna. The latter not only listened, but also remembered everything that was said. Often these conversations discussed issues of philosophy, architecture, and art, and Avicenna learned all this from them. Ibn Sina himself did not belong to the Ismailis, but he was very interested in the content of their sermons. Ismailis are opponents of Orthodox edition Sunni Islam, supporters of a Muslim sect that emerged in the middle of the 8th century. They were called in the Baghdad Caliphate and named after Ismail, the eldest son of the 6th Shiite Imam, Isfar al-Sadiq. The name of the person who taught Ibn Sina the basics of philosophy and mathematics has been preserved. This was Abu Abdullah al-Natili, who came from Khwarezm not long ago. He was apparently an Ismaili. This is the person about whom Biruni said, "I read the opinion of Abu Abdullah al-Ibn Ibrahim al-Tabari al-Natili on the number of natural lives in years." Other sources say that Abu Abdullah al-Natili studied medicine, among other sciences, and that his teacher in this field was the great physician and philosopher Abu Faraj ibn al-Tayyib. Biography of Ibn Sina, written in 1012, written by his student and friend Abu Ubaid al-Jajani. It covers the first half of his life. The second half of Jajani's biography is based on what he saw while he was with him until the end of his life. The biography states, "My parents sent me to a vegetable seller and a learned man. I learned this science from him as a Hindu. Then Abu Abdullah al-Natili, who was known as a philosopher, came to Bokhara. My father settled him in our house, hoping that he would teach me. And until he came, I studied jurisprudence and attended classes on it. Subshikt, Astitik Ismail Azizahit. I was the best of the questioners. The study went so well that soon the student not only caught up with the teacher, but also surprised him several times. He speaks of his teacher in his autobiography without disparaging remarks. Then I began to study Natili's book Isaguji. When he told me the definition of tech, in response to the question, what is it? It is said about many things. I made such an analysis of this definition. I like it. He had never heard of it. He was very surprised at me and advised my parents not to engage me in anything but science. The same thing happened with Euclid's book. He studied 5 or 6 theorems with the help of a teacher, and the rest independently. Then I moved on to the Almagest, and when I finished the introductory parts and reached the geometric figures, Anantali, I said, "Study them yourself." He said, "Read them yourself, solve the theorem, then come to me and show me the result, and I will explain to you what is right and what is wrong." Then I began to study the books on my own, and I conveyed the questions that arose before me to the teacher. But the result of all this was only one, and thus some of the incomprehensible situations that confused the teacher were eliminated. There were many questions that he did not know before, and he learned them from me. Then Natili said goodbye to me, headed for Gurganj, and I continued to read and collect books. I also came across other treatises on physics and metaphysics, and every day the doors of science opened wider before me. More interesting details are given about how this intense work, which determined the enormous spiritual growth of the young man, developed. Then I continued my studies of science for another year and a half and studied logic and all the branches of philosophy. During this time, I did not sleep a single night, and during the day I did nothing but study. I didn't do anything. When I had perfected logic, natural science, and mathematics, I turned to theology and read metaphysics. But I did not understand its meaning. The purpose of the person who wrote it was hidden from me. I read metaphysics 40 times and memorized it, but with all this I still could not understand it and its intended purpose. I despaired of the possibility of understanding it and said, "There is no way to understand this book." But the day before sunset, I was at the bookseller's market. A merchant held a book in his hand and praised it loudly. And he gave me this book, but I was dissatisfied and pushed it away. "This science is useless." But he said to me, "Buy this book. Indeed, it is cheap. I will sell it for 3 dirhams, and the owner needs money to pay it." I bought it, and it turned out to be Abu Nasr al-Farabi's book on the purposes of metaphysics. I returned home and began to read it quickly. The doors to the main ideas of this book were opened before me, and all difficulties were removed. I was very happy about this, and the next day I thanked my great Lord and distributed a large amount of charity to the needy. A very characteristic detail concerns the purchase of the book. If the bookseller thought that it was possible to persuade the young man to buy an explanation of Aristotle's metaphysics, how special the city was, how high the culture of Bokhara was. The rows where the manuscripts were sold were meetings, conversations, and arguments of philosophers, scientists, and poets. Abu Nasr Muhammad al-Farabi, an outstanding philosopher and encyclopedia scientist of Central Asia, who enthusiastically embraced the work of Ibn Sina. In the East, Aristotle was considered the first and called him the second teacher. He was born in the village of Farab on the banks of the Surdaria. He left behind many works on philosophy, mathematics, and physics. In his work Classification of Sciences, he gave a general overview of all branches of knowledge. He wrote a treatise on the parts of the human body, in which the tasks of medicine are defined. He is credited with introducing European scientists to Aristotle's teachings. He did not only provide basic explanations. Aristotle's works, as well as Plato, who did a lot to separate advanced Aristotelian ideas from idealistic concepts, paved the way for the emergence of one of the greatest figures of medieval culture, Ibn Sina. Ibn Sina became interested in medicine very early. "Then I became interested in the science of medicine," he says in his biography, "and began to read books on it. And medicine is not a difficult science. And of course, I mastered it in the shortest possible time, so the most famous doctors of that time began to ask me for advice. I also visited the sick, and as a result of the experience I gained, the doors of medicine and practice opened before me, which is impossible to describe. With all this, I did not stop studying jurisprudence and participated in disputes about it. And at that time, I was 16 years old. Ibn Sina studied medicine under the guidance of the famous Bokhara doctor, author of a number of medical works, Abu al-Mansur Kamari. The Christian doctor Abu Sal al-Masi, author of the work 100 Books on the Art of Medicine, invited him to study medicine and advised him to do it. This work served as a guide for a long time and influenced the views of the author of the Canon. Abu Sal al-Masi was a Nestorian. Nestorianism is a movement in Christianity that emerged in the 5th century in Byzantium. Its founder was Nestorius, the Patriarch of Constantinople in 428 to 431. In 529, when Emperor Justinian closed all philosophical schools in Athens, the Nestorians, under the influence of church reaction and as a result of their struggle against the Byzantine nobility, were forced to leave their homeland and flee to the states of Central Asia, India, and even China. In the Persian city of Gandhishapur, the capital of Khuzestan during the Sassanid era, they founded a medical school modeled on Alexandria, which played a major role in the development of medicine in the East. Indian doctors also worked there. This school was closely connected with India and China. The academy was the center of natural science of the Sassanid state for a long time, from which a number of generations of doctors and philosophers came. The Nestorians translated the works of the ancients into Syriac and Arabic. By the beginning of the 10th century, the major works of Aristotle and Dioscorides, Hippocrates and Galen, in particular, had been translated. They became known in Europe thanks to these translations. Ibn Sina admitted patients for free, and in his autobiography, he mentions using this practice to study various methods of treating diseases. He soon became a famous doctor. The ruler of Bokhara, according to the biography, at that time Ibn Mansur fell ill one day, and the doctors could not determine his illness. My name became known to them because of my knowledge, and they told him about me and asked him to call me. I came and participated in their treatment, Nuha 11 Ibn Mansur, and distinguished myself in serving this SMU. Ibn Sina received permission to use the emir's extensive library as a gift. I entered the storage room of books, consisting of many rooms, and in each room there were chests of books stacked one on top of the other. In one room were Arabic books and poems. In another room were books on jurisprudence. So in each room there were books related to some branch of science. I began to read the list of the books of my predecessors and began to take book after book, whatever I wanted. The various books that I saw and read, one can guess, no one had heard of their names. I had never seen them before, and I have never seen them since. I read these books, learned a lot, and became a scholar of science. By the time I was 18, I had completed all the sciences, and nothing new had been revealed to me since then. The difference is that back then I understood science more quickly, but now I look at science more deeply. I know it more deeply and clearly, the young scientist said, beginning to write early. At the request of his neighbor Abu al-Hasan al-Arudi, Ibn Sina says in his autobiography, I compiled a book for him that contained all my knowledge. Collection. I mentioned all the sciences in it except mathematics. And I was then 21 years old. At the request of another neighbor, a native of Khwarezm, the jurist Abu Bakr al-Barka, he wrote the book Result and Result, consisting of about 20 books. He also wrote a book on ethics for him, which he called the Book of Gratitude and Sin. It was at this time that his observations conducted in Dari on the fall and composition of meteorites, the passage of Venus and Mercury across the solar disk, began. By the age of 20, young Ibn Sina had acquired a wide range of knowledge and knew all the sciences of his era. At this time, the Samanid state was experiencing its last days, and in 999 it was conquered first by the Karakhanids, then by Bagration, and then by Mahmud of Ghazni. Ibn Sino's father died this year. Seeing that Sultan Mahmud could not find the necessary conditions for the work he was pursuing, Ibn Sino left Bokhara, moving from city to city, and headed for the capital of Khwarezm, Gurganj, to return to his homeland. Wandering in a foreign land, from one city to another, from the palace of one feudal lord to another, he visited the rulers of Khwarezm, Hamadan, Abivard Tus, Ray, Gorgan Kazvin, Hamadan, Isfahan, and experienced hardships, becoming a vizier or being in prison. But he did not stop his creative work for a single day. Ibn Sino found people who were close in spirit in the prosperous Khwarezm, where he had come to about 1,000. The Khwarezmians created examples of high material and spiritual culture. The famous Arab geographer and traveler Yakut left evidence of his admiration for Gurganj, the capital of Khwarezm, from the editor. I do not think that there is a city in the world similar to the main city of Khwarezm. The abundance of wealth and the size of the capital, the large population and the closeness to virtue and the fulfillment of religious commandments and faith are the conditions for it. Khwarezm experienced an economic and cultural boom in the 19th century. The reign of Khwarezm Shah Mamun II Ibn Mamun, 999-1017, was the heyday of Khwarezm. Outstanding scientists and philosophers gathered at the court of Mamun II and in his presence. Among them is the outstanding Khwarezmian scholar and encyclopedist Abu Rayhan Biryuni, whose works were devoted to the problems of astronomy, mathematics, physics, geography, pharmacognosy, history, ethnography, philology. Among them was the astronomer and physician Abu Sul Isa Ibn Yahya al-Masihi, who was Biruni's teacher and friend of Ibn Sino. Ibn Sino dedicated his work on the measurement of angles to him. Among them were the physician Abu al-Khair Ibn al-Hamr, the nephew of the Khwarezm Shah, the teacher of al-Biruni,